Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. This evening I'm going to talk about 10 favourite new to me authors that I read pretty much for the first time in 2023 and I would love to carry on reading in 2024. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, so just to be clear, these are authors that I discovered last year. I've only read perhaps one or two books from each of these authors, so we're not including things like Stephen King, Dean Koontz, anything like that, obviously. There's one or two authors that I've read more than one book, but pretty much every book is a 4 or 5 star, and I'm very surprised that I actually haven't read more from them, and I plan to change that this year. Now another thing is that I'm not going to talk about series so much in this video. Actually planning on doing something more like that in the future. I'm going to talk about books also that are not on my Kindle or that I don't own, with one exception. So books that I've actually given a book haul and spoken about. I'm trying to talk about brand new books. And the thing is that I've had to look on Goodreads, I've had to look at the ratings, everything else, and I've come up with a list of books from each of these authors that I adore, that I discovered last year, that deserve to be on this list. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Okay, the first author I'm going to talk about is the most recent discovery, and that is Chad Lutsky. And there are a couple of books on my Kindle that I'm going to read quite soon, but there's a couple of other ones I found that are worthy of mention. And of course Chad Lutsky, Skullface Boy, that's the story that actually made me fall in love with this author. And other two books that I really want to read, first of all, are Of Foster Homes and Flies. And I've got a thing about flies. That's a dark coming of age story with this, I think it's a 12-year-old boy, and his mother dies, but he's been neglected, and he does nothing to report this to the authorities because he wants to go to take part in I think it's a spelling bee. So he just kind of leaves the fact that his mother has actually died, and he carries on with life as normal. Sounds damn creepy, but apparently it is a creepy, dark coming of age story. The thing with Chad Lutsky that I've realized is that there's a lot more to him than just pure horror. He is so original, and even in all the sort of little books that I've seen, the synopsis, it all sounds so interesting and so original. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. The second book is Wormwood, where a 14-year-old boy, now this 14-year-old boy is with a mother who travels around a lot between the states, so she's a bit of a nomad. And now he's never been kissed, he's never made friends, nothing. And then, at the one place they settle down in, he meets a girl. Unfortunately, this girl leads him down a dark path. That's all I know about that particular book. The second new to me author from 2023 is Christopher Triana. I don't know how to pronounce that. But I absolutely love Gone to See the Riverman. The Prettiest Girl in the Grave was okay. And there's a book that's on my radar, and that is Full Brutal. Now this sounds a lot more splatterpunk. This sounds a lot more dark than the other two books. Perhaps not, I don't know. But it's about this pretty girl, and she's at school. I think she's 16 years old. And she's got everything going for her. She's actually in the cheerleading squad. She gets good grades. She's got a good family. She's got a good future. But she's sick to hell of it. It's not what she wants, really. So she decides, just for shits and giggles, to get impregnated. But not just by anyone. She decides to basically have sex with the school teacher and ruin his life. And she's not exactly she doesn't accept just that, but she goes down a life of like ruin and violence and ultimately perhaps murder. So yeah, sounds very interesting. And if you look at the cover there, yeah, she doesn't look like kind of normal, does she? So that is full brutal. Okay, the third author, and I only read one short story, and that's Octavia E Butler. That's right. I read Bloodchild, which was a science fiction horror novel with a lot of body horror, but which was so fascinating. And now this book that I want to read is called Kindred. And I've heard this raved about on booktube like you can't believe. And it's a book that I'm dying to get my hands on. Although it might be a very difficult read for me, that's okay. It's about this black woman who goes back in time, and she's a modern woman. She goes back in time to the slavery era. And she has these situations in the era, and she keeps going back repeatedly. And each time it's longer, and it becomes a lot more difficult. Now, yeah, these are the kind of books that maybe I haven't been reading as much of in the past, but this sounds particularly interesting. And it is a well-loved book, an award-winning book, so I'm going to give it a go. So that is Kindred by Octavia E Butler. Next up we have Joe R. Lansdale. And I've read two of his books this year, and I just love his sense of humour, a very dark sense of humour. And I've read The Drive-In, which I'd love to read, the sequels. Oh, and by the way, in this video I'm going to mention sequels, but I'm not going to talk about the books because I still don't know how to do that without giving away spoilers. It's kind of difficult, you know, talk about the end of the last book and then you talk about the sequel, so I've still got to figure that out. So I'm definitely going to read The Drive-In and Part 2, and also Savage Season, Hap and Leonard Part 1, which I read right at the beginning of the year in January, and I think it's a long series with Hap and Leonard and these two characters, and I want to continue with that series. The book I have chosen, is The Bottoms, which I actually have a hard copy of up there somewhere. Now this is narrated by an old man. He's looking back on his childhood. By the way, this is one of his most revered works. I think seen as his most important work. And he's looking back on his childhood in the 1930s Texas time. And there's a string of murders. There's a serial killer on the loose. These women, these prostitutes are being sexually abused and just horribly murdered. And of course what happens? Justice, or rather no justice. This black man who's innocent is found guilty of these crimes, and the Ku Klux Klan decide to lynch him and basically murder him. So much for justice. And soon after that, more murders start taking place. So they realize this guy was innocent. And apparently it's quite an important work. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he really touches into those things as well that I suppose Octavia Butler book will do as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've kind of been avoiding it. I prefer his real horror and kind of crime horror, but I think I need to read it this year, and that is The Bottoms. Next up we have Victor Lval. As a fifth author. I've only read The Ballad of Black Tom and I really enjoyed it. Super entertaining. Yes, it also had commentary about racism and things like that, but I also found it in its own right a very entertaining, exciting story. And what I want to read more from him is a book called The Changeling, which I've heard great things on booktube. And I didn't actually go into details about what the story was about, so I wrote down a little bit from Goodreads just to read to you about The Changeling. A classic fairy tale retelling, and I love those. Imaginatively explores parental obsession, spousal love, and the secrets that make strangers out of the people we love the most. A thrilling and emotionally devastating journey through the gruesome legacies that threaten to devour us and the homely, messy magic that saves us if we're lucky. So that's all I really know about the book. But yeah, if it's anything like The Ballad of Black Tom, I'm there for it. The sixth author is Kean Patrick Burke. Now, I've only read Sour Candy from him. It's just such a good writer. It tells such a weird story. This story is so weird, goes to such dark places, but he just controls the whole thing so skillfully. I absolutely love this story. And the story I want to read is also being talked about on BookTube, and that is called Kean. And now we're back to hillbillies and backwoods type with rape, murder, and all that wonderful stuff that I love, as you know. And it's about a lone survivor of basically all her friends are raped and murdered, and she's a lone survivor. And then apparently it kind of goes to her family and to the perpetrators and their family and everyone who try to help her and all of them as well. So it becomes a lot bigger than just that one event, which sounds very interesting. I don't know anything else about it, but I'm always there for a good backwoods sort of crime, murder, rapey thing. So it should be fun. Seventh author is David Sodon. Is it Green? Sorry, is it Green? And he wrote a little book called The Horror, which blew me away as well. Folk horror, and I just loved the characters, and very original tale, and got quite weird. And another one I want to read by him is Maggie's Grave, and I've actually heard one of my subscribers actually recommend that particular book. And from what I remember, it's about this dead Scottish town. There's about 46 inhabitants left, and it's sitting at the foot of a mountain. And yeah, it's pretty dead. And the only thing to see or do there, and there's this graveyard, and there's this grave. And on the grave is written, Maggie Wall, buried here as a witch. And that's the only inscription. Then what Goodreads says is, but sometimes the dead don't stay buried, especially when they have unfinished business. So this sounds like an awesome potential folk horror novel set in the Scottish wilds. Looking forward to it. That's Maggie's Grave. Okay, next up we have Brian Kean, The Rising. Now this is definitely a series that I want to continue with, and I know it carries on for a while, but I've chosen another book by him. And really, out of all zombie novels, I think The Rising is probably my favourite. I know zombies aren't always in favour with a lot of people, but it's so original. The ideas are so clever. And I like the sound of this other book, which is Dead Sea. So yes, once again you got zombies, flesh-eating zombies. And what happens is that they drive these survivors, there's a group of survivors, they drive them out of town, and these survivors found themselves on a ship out at sea. I don't know what kind of ship it is, but apparently they are safe. No, apparently not. Yeah, so this sounds really interesting. I imagine zombies swimming or walking on the floor of the ocean and dragging themselves up onto the ship. I have no idea, but it just sounds like a fun premise, and I'm looking forward to that. So that is Dead Sea. The ninth author is Mark Morris, and I read Toady by Mark Morris, and it was 5-star. Absolute, incredibly imaginative, world building, just so well written, so dark, just a fantastic novel. And now I'm very tempted to try and find the second book by this author, which is called Stitch. Now Stitch is about, as far as I remember, it's a university campus. And then you've got this character who's called Stitch, who takes these students that are vulnerable and lonely and whatever, and makes them leave all their human baggage behind and takes them over to the dark side. From what I read, this book is brings this whole cult thing into it, and it is very dark, it's very gruesome. I think I read somewhere about, self-mutilation and all sorts of things, but it goes to very dark places. So in fact, for all of these books, just be aware of trigger warnings. I didn't mention that before, But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this particular book, and that is Stitch. And finally, we've got Brian Lamley, who wrote Necroscope, the first book in a 13-book series. And I absolutely love Necroscope. I'm not going to talk about it. I've given reviews. Last year I actually mentioned it a number of times, but it is the first part of the series, and it definitely sets things up for the rest of the series, with this vampire, with these two characters. Yeah, it's just brilliant. And really, I'm not going to talk about another book by him. I just desperately want to continue the series. I think the second book is called Vampire, and yeah, so I definitely want to continue with that, starting with Vampire. I imagine that the vampire that didn't have such a huge part to play in the first part of the series maybe becomes a bigger character as we move along. So that's Vampire. Okay everyone, so those are my 10 new to me authors from 2023 that I absolutely loved, and the books that I desperately want to read from them, including a whole lot of others as well. These are authors that I want to explore and engage with, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to 2024 and finding more from these authors. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are, if there are other books by these authors that you would recommend. Yeah, and just let me know your thoughts, and take care of yourselves. Give me a thumbs up, like and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.